Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network here on YouTube at Stillman and Co. Get in here, everybody, on what is a wonderful, and I mean wonderful, Tuesday afternoon. First of all, can I start this show? And I am not a huge Toronto Blue Jay fan, but how about them Toronto Blue Jays? Obviously, Lindsay is a huge Toronto Blue Jay fan from Toronto, and our son is half Torontoan. And so if the Braves are going to be shitty, which they were this year, then at least there was the Blue Jays to root for. I did watch the game last night. I did have the stunning 4K. You know, I've been paying for 4K on YouTube TV for years. And I watched the baseball game last night in 4K until the second football game came on, and then we did the multi-view, which I have more thoughts on here in a little bit that we'll get into down the road. But I watched it last night, that beautiful 4K, and that beautiful win by the Blue Jays. And I'm thinking that Lindsay and I may have to make a trip to Toronto for one of the World Series games. So for that, we shall see. And TDG tells everybody to hit the like button on the way in. It's like taking your shoes off before you come inside the home. Again, that is another thing that they do a lot of in Canada, is taking shoes off before they enter the house. So go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe if you haven't. Our numbers keep growing every day, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. And also, if you have not heard, don't go now, but later on today, go listen to a football show on the 440 Sports YouTube page or wherever you get your podcast with 440 Sports. It was another edition of Stilly and Paulie as me and PK broke down the Titans. And that is, in fact, where I want to start on today's program. And it is something that PK said. And filling in for Braden with Paul, we were having the Cam Ward discussion about whether or not 7 games into Cam Ward's career, it's fair to call him a bust. And for the record, I think Cam Ward is going to be a bust. In fact, I said Cam Ward is going to be a bust. And I laid out my reasons, and Paul actually said that I made good points and that it's better when I make them like that than when I just yell and scream them into a mic. That's his opinion. I've got mine. But again, I think Ward's going to be a bust. And Paul said something today that made me so viscerally angry, but not at Paul, but more so at the situation that the Titans find themselves in and that we as Titan fans find ourselves in when it comes to Cam Ward. And that is this idea. I don't know where this comes from, but the idea that, hey, Cam Ward might be a league average quarterback or an above league average quarterback, but he's not going to end up being an elite franchise QB. Here's what PK said earlier today on a football show. Take a look.
Cam as a prospect is not Joe Burrow or Manning or any of these guys that were 1-1s. That's completely fair. But they don't need him to be the best quarterback in the league. They need a guy who can start for them for 5 or 6 years minimally and be a guy who's a top 15 or 12 quarterback. Is that the ideal scenario for the first overall pick in the draft? No. Does it settle down your franchise and give you somebody that can lead you and be effective? Yes.
Oh my God. That statement so truly grinds my gears. And while I'm sure somebody who watched a football show earlier today will say, Jared, you didn't go nuts when Paul said it, I will tell you the reason that I didn't go nuts, and it's because Paul is not the one who picked Cam Ward thinking he was going to be Patrick Mahomes. It is not Paul who unretired Warren Moon's number. It is not Paul who turned down the Giants trade in order to draft Cam Ward. But it was Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker and Brian Callahan. who said, oh my God, we have to take this quarterback. And Callahan, who's already been fired, Callahan said after they took Ward, when you've got the chance to take a franchise quarterback, you don't pass it up. Well, then he better be a franchise quarterback and an elite franchise quarterback. Because if what Paul is saying, that Cam Ward can eventually develop into a stable tier 2 quarterback, then everybody with the Titans should be fired. Because it was well established before the new league year that there was probably one first-round quarterback this year, Cam Ward, maybe another in Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart, and then a handful of free agent options that were some form of recycled veteran. And the Titans, by virtue of letting Rand cook last year, had the worst record in the entire NFL, and they could do whatever they wanted to do. At that point in time, that's why I stick my flag in the ground and I say the new league year, before free agency, before the draft, before the Titans were on any sort of clock, they could have done whatever they wanted to do. They had the number 1 pick, so they could draft Cam Ward. Or they could have traded for a veteran quarterback or signed any of the guys that were available and out there. So at that point, everything was on the table. And at that point, the Titans decided to go with Cam Ward. The only justification for taking Cam Ward at that spot, as opposed to the Giants trade, was if you thought he was going to be an elite quarterback in the NFL. That if you thought he was going to be Mahomes, if you thought he was going to be Lamar Jackson, if you thought he was going to be Josh Allen, that's the only time that would have made any sense, the only situation that would have been acceptable to pass up the Giants trade and to pass up the signing of a Sam Darnold or signing of a Daniel Jones or really signing of any of those guys. So at that point, with everything on the table, the Titans decided to go with Cam Ward. Mel Kiper Jr., and I am not claiming that Mel Kiper Jr. is the end-all and be-all of draft analysis, but Mel Kiper Jr. said he did not have an elite quarterback grade on Cam Ward. Said Cam Ward was more like J.J. McCarthy than he was Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, or Drake May. Dane Brugler at The Athletic compared Ward's potential as an impact player to that of Kyler Murray. ESPN's Matt Miller asked NFL executives where he would have ranked prospects over the last 5 years. And they said only Michael Penix Jr. and Kenny Pickett were behind Cam Ward. I watched Cam Ward's tape, and I saw the highlight reel plays, and I have to say, they were impressive. And I said, he's got that athleticism like Mahomes, that backyard football element in his game, where he can run around and he can make a play and off balance, fire one out there and put it on a dime. But so could Johnny Manziel in college. That doesn't mean it will work in the NFL. So while I saw the highlight reel throws, I also saw the poor mechanics and the dangerous decisions. I saw a quarterback throwing with his arm and not with his base. And I saw someone who didn't have a single elite physical trait. Cam does not have an elite trait. He is not huge. He's 6'2". He is not athletic like Michael Vick. He does not have an elite physical trait that would say, hey, man, you can't get this somewhere else. And so I said, trade the pick and sign one of these quarterbacks. And again, it's well documented. I put out there in February that my choices for Titans quarterback, number one, Sam Darnold on a 4-year deal at $160 million, 80 of which was guaranteed. Number two, Daniel Jones, who, by the way, might be quarterbacking the best team in the NFL. Number three, Mac Jones, who is 4-1 as a starter this year, and Aaron Rodgers. And then I'd say, okay, fine. If you can't, then go ahead and draft Cam Ward. So I watched the tape and I saw, hey, he may become really good, but he's not really good right now. And it's going to take a lot in order for him to be good. And you can trade the pick, build your football team, and sign somebody who is already good but not great. And that's why I'm not getting on Paul for saying that maybe Cam Ward can develop into a tier 2 quarterback, because Paul probably would have gone the Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones route. But the Titans didn't. And Titans Twitter didn't. You can make whatever revisionist history claim you want to make right now. But the truth is, when it comes to the Titans, they saw Mahomes. And they can say whatever they want, but they thought in March, when this decision had to be made, that Cam Ward was going to be an elite franchise quarterback. You do not unretire the number of a Hall of Famer for the hope that they one day become Alex Smith. So I have to ask all of you out there who thinks deep down inside that Cam Ward can still be a franchise elite, top of the league quarterback, what are you basing that on? Well, Jared, if we go out and get a coach who comes in here and, newsflash, part of the triumvirate that picked Cam Ward was the previous coach, and he's already been fired. Also, the same morons that thought Cam Ward was Mahomes and that Sam Darnold was a total bum are the same people who you are expecting to go out and find some great coach to save Cam Ward's career. Isn't that the hope? That Brinker and Borgonzi somehow, some way, go out and find some great coach, and that's going to be the saving grace of the Titans? Again, they already thought this guy was Mahomes, and I'll tell you, he's not Mahomes. And then there's this. We always talk about organizations that ruin potentially good quarterbacks. And I am a firm believer that if Patrick Mahomes hadn't gone to Andy Reid with Travis Kelce at tight end, with Tyreek Hill at wide receiver, with Alex Smith as the starting quarterback where he sat on the bench for a year, with Eric Fisher, the number 1 overall pick at left tackle, if Patrick Mahomes had not gone to that team, I don't think Mahomes would be who he is today. So we talk all the time about bad organizations ruining potentially great quarterbacks. But do we ever talk about what these organizations do to the coach? You know, Todd Bowles got fired from the Jets. Mike Vrabel got fired from the Titans. And Dan Campbell was the interim head coach in Miami, only to be passed up. Do you want to know who replaced those guys? We all know Brian Callahan replaced Mike Vrabel. But in both the case of Dan Campbell in Miami as the interim coach and Todd Bowles in New York, they were replaced by Adam Gase. So you're either still holding out hope that Cam Ward can be Patrick Mahomes, that with the right coach from the same people who essentially brought you the last coach, and this awful team, and whatever plan there might have been for Cam Ward, you're either banking that they knock it out of the park, or you're lowering your standards, like Paul said, to a potential tier 2 quarterback who can bring stability to the organization, a la Ryan Tannehill, which they could have easily signed in free agency this year. And the problem with this is that if Paul's right, and that's a big word, if Cam Ward can develop into a tier 2 quarterback, then doesn't that show poor evaluation? There is no doubt, and I think even you guys would agree with me on this. I'm looking at you, the distinguished gentleman. I don't think there is any doubt that you would agree with me that you are better off signing a tier 2 quarterback and then trading the draft pick for 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. That's 4 players, plus you signed a tier 2 quarterback. That is better than using a pick, hoping that a guy can eventually one day become a tier 2 quarterback. So which one is it? Do you still think he can be Mahomes? Do you still think he can blossom into a franchise quarterback? If you think he can be Mahomes, if you think he can blossom into a franchise quarterback, explain to me the path that gets them there without Chad Brinker absolutely nailing a head coaching hire, or the Titans coming up with some unbelievable roster surgery. Because I don't see it. I don't get it. And people will say, it takes time for a franchise quarterback. It took time for Baker Mayfield, and it took time for Sam Darnold, and it took time. No quarterback drafted number 1 overall gets 7 years. And that's how long it's taken. Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones and all these guys that aren't Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. That's how long it takes. You're not going to give Cam Ward 7 years. And if I told you when they drafted Cam Ward, hey, this guy's not going to be very good right now, but he's going to be good in 7 years, you would have said, go ahead and sign Sam Darnold. Go ahead and sign Daniel Jones. Go ahead and sign Mac Jones. So which one is it now? Are we at the point where we're willing to put our hands up and we're ready to say, you know what? He's going to be a tier 2 quarterback. And that's the hard part. And the other hard part about this is there's really nothing they can do about it now. They're at least stuck with Ward for another year. And even then, they'll probably give him every shot. This feels like Mariota 2.0. And that's the sad part. So that's the first thing. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I absolutely love Hiller. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. Going to tell you about a stat that is really starting to bother me when it comes to Ward and the Titans. But first, let's talk Hiller. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They've been in business since 1990. They are family-owned and operated. With 100% satisfaction. If happy, you'll be here. The service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work that is performed, they will make it right. Learn more at happyhiller.com. Hiller, professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians. And again, I know this because I use them at my home. They come into your home and they leave it clean and better than they found it. And care is their core value. They believe that when they care about others, everybody wins, and that they take care of the customer every time on every job. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Okay. Number 2. There is a stat that is a little depressing. And I'm not the biggest believer in QBR in the NFL. It's a stat ESPN developed about 20 years ago. And what they're trying to do, and I don't exactly know how they come about with QBR, and ESPN swears by QBR. It's almost like if you want to go work at ESPN, you better say, hey, I'm going to get up there and I'm going to just hawk the shit out of QBR. But I think in this context, it's a fair stat to use. It, again, is a stat in which they are trying to really determine the quarterback's value to the team. And so the single most depressing stat I can give you is the QBR metric. That in this particular context, I think is fair because of the comparison. And in 2024, Will Levis had a QBR of 25.2. Now, that's awful. That is abysmal. As far as QBR is concerned, 25.2, that is right there representative of the season that Will Levis had last year that was so bad that he had to go to the bench midway through. By comparison, Ryan Tannehill in 2020 had a QBR of 72.6. So again, last year in 2024, Will Levis had a QBR of 25.2. In 2025, Cam Ward has a QBR of 24.9. The QBR statistic is telling us that Will Levis in 2024 and Cam Ward in 2025 is essentially the same player. that they are almost identical in what they are giving the Titans. Their quarterback ratings actually favor Levis. Levis at 81.4, Ward at 70.9. Now, I know the Titans' offensive line isn't the best offensive line in the NFL, but Ward has a better offensive line and certainly a more expensive offensive line than Will Levis had last year. They essentially have had the same receiving core. They, for the most part, had the same coach. And yet the narrative between the two and the two football seasons couldn't be any different, could it? The narrative surrounding Will Levis last year was that Levis was the problem with the football team. And the narrative surrounding Ward this year, at least with a lot of you people, is that Ward is the victim. Levis is the problem. Ward is the victim. And there are a lot of problems about Will Levis's game. And if I had to bet for or against him, I certainly wouldn't bet on him. I don't even know if Will Levis, given his personality, could work as with Kyle Shanahan as his coach. But it is eerily similar how shocking these statistics say their seasons are. And again, if you want to build a successful team, you're not going to do it by dumping Will Levis and using the number one overall pick on his replacement and then ending up with the same player. And so those stats, as a Titan fan, scare the crap out of me. Because what happened is the Titans overrated themselves. They overrated their ability to build a roster around Cam Ward when clearly they were limited with free agent money they were willing to spend. And they were clearly limited with draft picks they were willing to use because they didn't have a third round pick. And they went into the draft knowing they were going to take Cam Ward number one. So you didn't have that first rounder to build around him. And now you're getting Will Levis. And you can say whatever you want that makes you feel better. As far as Ward is concerned, you can say, well, but Jared Ward is obviously a better player than Levis. And for the most part, I would agree. But the statistics are saying you use the first overall pick to dump Will Levis and then to draft Will Levis. That's what the objective statistics are telling you. So if you think that all of a sudden Ward has done anything that has justified his pick being number one overall, you got to tell me what it is because I haven't seen it. And the other thing with Cam that I don't think gets brought up a lot, and again, this is why, to me, this is all subjective. It's about the narrative. The narrative was Levis was the problem, Cam is the victim. And what doesn't get brought up in this is something that if Levis did this last year, he would have been crucified for it. And to a certain extent with his mayonnaise commercials, he was crucified for it. But nobody seems to talk about the fact that Cam Ward talks a lot of shit. And up until this point, Cam Ward has yet to back it up. At the beginning of training camp, Cam Ward said he thought that they should have a top 10 offense in the NFL. And I heard that and I thought, easy there, buddy. A top 10 offense? Give me a break. And people said to me, I want my quarterback to be confident. Jared, what's my quarterback supposed to say? Your quarterback is supposed to say, hey, we're really just worried about practice today. We're not worried about the season. We're not worried about the stats. We're worried about getting through the first rep of practice today because that's where the focus needs to be. I want my quarterback to set the example by cashing checks that his mouth writes. I saw in the Athletic story, Cam said that once he figures the NFL out, the league is fucked. That sounds great. And again, that leads to people saying, he's confident, Jared, which apparently is what convinced the Titans to draft him with the first overall pick. But maybe let's get a first down in the second half of a football game before we start bragging about how good we're going to be. You know how I am. I'm a believer that If you can walk the walk, you can talk the talk. But again, Cam Ward's got a lower QBR and a lower quarterback rating than Will Levis had last year. And if that bothers me, how do you think it makes his teammates feel? They've already been pissed about him running his mouth once this year. So Cam needs to stop talking shit and he needs to start doing shit. And then you can talk. But I think we need to put a new rule in place. If you are a quarterback who is going to talk shit and tell everybody about how good you're going to be and how you're going to dominate the league and how awesome you're going to be and how great the team's going to be ranked and how awesome the coach is and how it's the best receiver. From now on, if you're going to do that, you have to have a higher QBR than Will Levis. That's the only thing I ask. So I do want to touch on Vanderbilt. Caroline going to join us in about 10 minutes or so. You know, it's just more fun to talk Vanderbilt right now than it is to talk about the Titans. And we will get to some of your reaction about the Titans before Caroline pops in. But Vanderbilt and Missouri is the game of the week with College Game Day. Think about this. Of their last 3 matchups, 2 of them for Vanderbilt are featured on College Game Day. Vanderbilt has now played 3 games in a row because they will play Missouri 2:30 ABC. Vanderbilt will now play 3 games in a row on ABC. How amazing is that? How shocking is that? And I couldn't be happier for Vanderbilt. And it's hard for me to ignore the fact that Vanderbilt is currently ranked 10th in the AP poll. And, well, only 12 teams get into the college football playoff. And I'm really kind of fighting on one hand with this idea of, man, how much of this, the enjoyment of what Vanderbilt is doing, is because here's little old Vanderbilt and they got to win over LSU, and here you go, and wow, how much of it is that? And how much of it is, boys and girls, Vanderbilt might have a shot at competing for a national title? And this is the question I want an answer to that I don't know, which is, who's good when it comes to college football? In 2025, who is good? And I try to tell people the rules are different. I saw somebody put a tweet out there the other day that said, Clark Lee has done a better job at Vanderbilt than James Franklin could have ever done. Well, the rules are different. Vanderbilt can pay players now. Vanderbilt is paying players now. If Vanderbilt could pay players when James Franklin was the coach, and Vanderbilt was as committed to paying players when James Franklin was the coach, I mean, I think James Franklin probably could have done a pretty good job. Now, I can't stand James Franklin, but that doesn't mean that he can't win. But I digress. We live in a different world as far as college football is concerned. Chris Massaro, the athletic director at MTSU, said to me one time that he used to collect old Sports Illustrateds. And when he would collect these old Sports Illustrateds, he would see the same teams from 1970 ranked in the top 10 that were ranked there that day. And this was about 5 or 6 years ago. And he said, look, it's Texas, USC, Alabama, Notre Dame. Well, now that we're paying the players, have you noticed? It's a little different. And again, I have to ask, who is actually good in college football in 2025? The number 1 team in the country, Ohio State, they've only played 1 good team. That's Texas, and I wouldn't even count Texas as good because Texas stinks. Now, Indiana has the win at Oregon, and they've got Fernando Mendoza, and they look legit. A&M, they've played a bunch of tough games. They've won every one of them. But again, every one of these games with A&M comes right down to the wire, including last week against Arkansas, who stinks. Is A&M that good? They're number 3. Alabama is number 4, and I actually think that that's good for Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt, in my opinion, played Alabama pretty tough. And I still go back to that Vandy Alabama game. And I thought Diego Pavia basically admitted it after the game was over, but he basically said, hey, I didn't play very well in the last game. And I've said to people, if Diego Pavia had played the way that he played against LSU, against Alabama, I think Vanderbilt would have won that game. Now, again, you can do the whole, if this had happened or if that would have happened, then and I get it. And Pavia did fumble the ball, and Pavia did throw the interception. But I watched Alabama play Tennessee, and I watched Alabama play Vanderbilt, and I thought Vanderbilt gave Alabama a tougher game than UT did. So, again, when it comes to this, I'm trying to figure out, is Vanderbilt actually competing to do something big in college football? Not just make it to the playoff, not just host College Game Day, not just be number 10 in the AP poll, but is this going to be something where Vanderbilt ends up in the college football playoff and they have a shot to win a game or two? Again, last week, Miami was the number 2 team in the country. And I watched Miami play Louisville. And I thought it was really Miami and the ACC refs against Louisville. It was so bad. As far as the officiating was concerned, it was so bad. And yet Louisville still won the game. I mean, Louisville basically handed the game to Miami by fumbling the ball late in the fourth quarter, deep in their own territory, up by 11. So Miami, who was dead to rights, ends up scoring a touchdown, and now it's a ball game again, and they ended up winning. So Miami's not that good. And now Miami's number 9. And if I had told you at the beginning of the year that Vanderbilt was going to be on par with Miami, you would have said that's crazy. Well, right now, Vanderbilt's 10 and Miami's 9. And we are in the middle of October. We are halfway through the season. Vanderbilt has played 7 games. So now we have a sense of, okay, was it that this team was actually decent, or was it that that team was actually bad? And you got to give Vanderbilt the credit. So again, I don't know if it's, hey, way to go, little old Vandy, we're proud of you, or if it is, holy shit, Vanderbilt might be competing for a college football title. Now, I don't think they'd beat Ohio State, and I don't think they'd beat Alabama, and I don't think they'd beat Indiana, and I don't think they'd beat A&M, but I don't know that. And I said this before the Alabama game, and I said this before the LSU game, and those were 2 games that had very different outcomes. But before the Alabama game on College Game Day, I saw those 2 helmets up there on the set. And I saw the Vandy helmet and I saw the Bama helmet. And I said, those helmets don't belong together. Like, I can't see, and I know Vanderbilt beat Bama the year before, but I can't see Vandy on par with Alabama. And Vanderbilt went in there, and I thought they gave Alabama a real game. And if it wasn't for the Pavia mistakes, I think they're right there with Bama. And then I kept saying last week, and I missed this in the 6-pack picks, but I picked LSU to win. Because when I saw the 2 helmets, I'm like, Vanderbilt does not belong next to LSU. Again, if you're watching the stream right now on YouTube, look at the bottom of the screen. There's a Vandy logo and there's an LSU logo. And you tell me, do you think these 2 logos belong next to each other? But it's a different era of college football. And there was, in my opinion, nothing fluky about Vanderbilt's win on Saturday. And then when it comes to, again, helmet scouting and putting them up, Indiana is the number 2 team in the country. And I know Indiana beat Oregon, but I still think that the ACC or the SEC is better, in my opinion, than the Big Ten. So they've got a real shot at the playoffs. And if Diego Pavia plays the way he played last week against LSU, they could win a game or 2 in the college football playoff. And at that point, it's not anymore, oh my God, it's little old Vandy. Now it is, oh my God, you have to respect Vanderbilt. You have to respect the Commodores. And good for College Game Day. I saw Awful Announcing was kind of shaming Vanderbilt or really shaming College Game Day for going to Vandy, because I guess there's some sort of FCS game. I think it might be North Dakota versus South Dakota. I don't know. I don't care. And they're like, oh man, they shouldn't do that. They should go to the FCS game and they shouldn't go to Vandy. I'm like, fuck you. Vanderbilt has earned College Game Day. This is the game of the week. This, to me, is one of those play into the playoff kind of games, because if Vanderbilt beats Missouri, they may not have to win at Tennessee at the end of the year to make the playoff. That's real juice. It's the middle of the day on ABC. That game is worthy of College Game Day. Don't tell me that, they should have gone to the FCS schools. Nobody wants to tune on College Game Day and watch them at the FCS school. I, by the way, have a bone to pick with College Game Day. It apparently has become the safe space for asshole coaches. So 2 weeks ago, it was Bill Belichick. They had a Belichick discussion, and everybody on the panel, with the exception of Desmond Howard, they're friends with Belichick. So they all said nice things about Belichick, like, well, it takes time to build a culture. Not in this environment in college football. I mean, Indiana, it took them 1 year to get to the playoff. Don't give me this horse shit that you need all these years at North Carolina. And that was 2 weeks ago. And then last week, they brought on James Franklin, and Nick Saban said, it's so unfair. It's so unfair, James Franklin, that they fired you, even though they gave you the most expensive defensive coordinator in college football and one of the most expensive rosters and supposedly a first-round quarterback. It's not fair, James Franklin. And I'm like, give me a freaking break. Caroline Fenton joins us now.
I thought I was coming on here to shit on the Titans. I didn't sign up for this.
So let's start with Vanderbilt LSU last week.
Oh, wonderful. Let's relive it. Best day of my life. Had a wonderful time.
Let me ask you a serious question about Vanderbilt.
Okay.
Is Vanderbilt, what is their ceiling at this point? Because there's a part of me that's really, really happy for Vandy as somebody who grew up a Vanderbilt fan. That's like, man, my dad was born in 1951. The last time Vanderbilt was 6-1 was 1950. So it's insane to me that Vanderbilt's having the success they're having, but it's a different sport. But I think some of it is, wow, look at little old Vandy go as far as they can. And I'm like, if Vanderbilt wins on Saturday against Missouri, are we still talking about little old Vandy? Should we be talking about little old Vandy in this era of college football? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vanderbilt's ceiling is making the college football playoff. Like that is a realistic path for Vandy. Now, it's not clear and obvious, but if Vanderbilt beats Missouri this weekend, they'll win at Texas. Texas is not a very good football team. Like, I think LSU would beat Texas on a neutral field, and Vanderbilt just whooped LSU and was the better team for a better part of 60 minutes. They'll go to Texas and beat Texas. They can beat Auburn. They'll definitely beat Kentucky. So, yeah, like to your point, they don't have to win at Tennessee. At that point, they'll be 10-2, and they will make the playoff. I think at this point, Vanderbilt's, the best path forward is maybe going 10-2 and potentially avoiding Atlanta. I don't think that getting to the conference championship game means as much or does as much for your college football playoff resume as maybe it used to. Because if Vandy goes to SEC championship and loses to Alabama, well, then they have 3 losses. Then you might miss out on the playoffs. So maybe that's best path forward. But, that's getting into a lot of intricacies into, what could potentially happen for Vandy. But yeah, I think the ceiling is getting to the CFP. That's a realistic conversation. It starts this weekend.
So when I saw the Vanderbilt Bama helmet next to each other, I'm like, these two don't belong together. And I felt the same way about the Vanderbilt LSU helmets. I'm like, this doesn't feel right next to each other. Mm-hmm. And I thought Vanderbilt went into Tuscaloosa. Alabama was on high alert in that game. And I thought, outside of a couple of Pavia mistakes, Vanderbilt gave Bama a game. To me, the score didn't indicate it, but there's no doubt Vanderbilt was tough on Alabama. Then I thought Vanderbilt really, again, it was a close score. I thought Vanderbilt handled LSU on Saturday, which leads me to who's good in college football, because Ohio State's supposedly good, but all I know is they beat Texas and Texas sucks. And Indiana's good, but when I look at the Indiana helmet next to the Vandy helmet, I'm not sure the Vanderbilt helmet doesn't belong with the Indiana helmet. A&M wins every game. It's very close. And then Bama's number 4. So you talk about, hey, they could make it to the playoff, and that would be good. I mean, could they make it to the playoff and win games in the playoff?
Well, it depends. I mean, could they? Yeah, for sure. It depends on who they're getting matched up with, because if Vanderbilt ends up getting matched up with, let's say Memphis, no disrespect to Memphis, but that's a game that Vanderbilt should win. That's a game that Vanderbilt should be favored in. If Vanderbilt takes on, let's say there's some rinky-dink team in the ACC that somehow miraculously wins the ACC championship after going 8-4 in the regular season, then yeah, that's a game that Vanderbilt should probably be favored in. So yeah, that's a realistic path. I kind of go back to Penn State as an interesting example in the 12-team college football playoff. Like, yes, Penn State got to the Final Four, but they beat SMU and Boise State to get there. So not every college football playoff win is equal, even though it gets you, a win in the college football playoff. You know what I mean? That not everyone feels like it's the same. They're not all weighted equally. And to your point about Indiana, Indiana and Ohio State, those two helmets, those two brands, the cachet that those two universities carry, they are not on the same wavelength. But I think Indiana belongs in the same conversation as Ohio State and this team and what they can be. I think Indiana has a very strong case to be the number one team in the country. That doesn't mean that Indiana is a better team than Ohio State, but that does mean that Indiana has far and beyond a better resume than Ohio State has. Going to Oregon and whooping Oregon by double digits is the best win that we have in college football right now. I think we all just have to understand that we're living in a different world of college football, that I still think that in college football, we still do have the haves and the have-nots. Like, I don't think it would be crazy to say if the season ended today that we could have Ohio State and Alabama in the national championship game. That's nothing new. That's something that we're all very used to. But I think that the gap between the haves and the have-nots have shrunk significantly more than any of us could have ever thought possible in a pre-NIL era.
So
I think Ohio State's good. I think Indiana's good. I think Vanderbilt's good. I think Oregon's still good. I think Notre Dame is good. Like, their two losses are to two top 10 teams. Like, I think Notre Dame is getting better week over week. We have several good teams, but I don't think that we have one elite team.
who do you think wins this week? And do you think Vanderbilt is a good story, or do you actually think they're going to make the playoff?
Their stretch coming up is tough. It looks significantly easier now, knowing how brutal Auburn is, knowing how brutal Texas is. I think Vanderbilt is a good team. They take on this like Clark Lee chip on your shoulder tough mentality. They out-toughed LSU for the better part of 60 minutes. Like, if LSU cashes in when they have, first and goal at the 1 yard line and can't score a touchdown, settled for field goals rather than touchdowns and missed a field goal, like, there was still a path for LSU to win that game. But let's say in a fantasy world, had LSU won that game, I still wouldn't have stepped away and said LSU was the better team. Regardless of the score, Vanderbilt was the tougher and better and more physical team for the better part of 60 minutes. We're talking about LSU, right? Like, that's a program that's built on toughness and physicality at the lines of scrimmage, and Vanderbilt outdid them at their own game for the better part of 60 minutes. So yeah, I think they are a good team. They're also a good story. At this point, they might be a better story than they are a team. That is no disrespect to who they are as a team, because I think they are a good team. But I think it's the fact that Vanderbilt went from going winless just a few seasons ago and being the doormat of the SEC to now being one of the biggest conversations in the country, to now being one of the better teams in the country. That's a hell of a story. Is Vanderbilt a college football playoff national championship contender? No, I can't go that far. But I think the fact that we're even talking about Vanderbilt into the CFP is not just an awesome story, but it's a testament to what Clark Lee has done and what he's built.
So I know you weren't there and we didn't know each other at the time, but I know you know this story. So I'm going to tell it because I feel like I can tell more things like this now. So in 2019, I threw a party in the backyard at my parents' house, and it was a freaking party. So it was announced in 2019 that Floyd and I had signed contract extensions. We actually signed them in 2018, but I had just kind of forgotten about it. And then I wanted to throw this party because I was trying to impress a girl. And so I threw this party in the backyard of my parents' house, and it was a freaking party. Like, it was expensive. It was done up. Long story short, a buddy of mine from college worked in the fundraising department at LSU, and he was in town because Vandy was playing LSU. And so Justin Vincent, who was the old running back when they won the national title when I was in middle school, he was in town with him, and they came to the party. And I'll never forget, like, I was pretty fireball hazed at this party. And I remember being like, is that Floyd over there talking to Justin Vincent, the national championship running back from LSU when I was like in the 7th grade. Like that, the next day, LSU beat Vanderbilt by about 900 points. That was Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Again, the all-star team versus a terrible Vanderbilt team. And I know the sport's different and everything else, but how did you take Saturday's loss? How did LSU fans take Saturday's loss, given the fact that at the end of the day, it's still Vanderbilt?
That was a very long-winded question that you just wanted to talk about your fancy party that you threw.
It was a fun party.
Yeah, I know. I've heard great things about
it. And it did work because it did impress that girl.
I know it did. I know it did. I know
and then she broke up with me like 9 times after that.
Yeah, we've been through that. You're better off without her.
9 lives.
Yeah, it happens. I think LSU fans took that loss as, okay, that's it. Like the Brian Kelly era is over. Like it's not actually over. He's not going to get fired on Sunday, but emotionally, spiritually, it's over. That LSU fans no longer have any shred of belief that Brian Kelly can turn this season around, that Brian Kelly can get LSU to the college football playoff, and that Brian Kelly can win a national championship at LSU. Like, and let's not act like that's crazy, because the last 3 coaches at LSU have won national championships. And I don't think anyone views Les Miles or Ed Orgeron as like the most genius college football coaches out there. Like, I think that was the expectation. I know that was the expectation, that Brian Kelly was going to come into LSU, he was going to get them to the college football playoff, and he was going to win them a national championship. That loss on Saturday, although this isn't the same Vanderbilt of old, I get that. It was the kick in the gut that like this guy isn't the guy, and there's nothing that we can do about it. There is nothing that can be done with the sheer amount of this man's buyout that can be done. And it was kind of a hopeless and helpless feeling, but it was a definitive feeling of this is not the guy, and this is going to be an incredibly hurtful era of LSU football.
I think we've got a problem in college football. And that problem is treating coaches like they're national championship caliber coaches when they haven't actually won a national title.
Well, let's be fair. Three active head coaches in college football have won national championships.
That's not what I'm talking about. I agree with you. When you pay Brian Kelly the money that they paid him to leave Notre Dame to go to LSU, the standard is to win the national championship at some point. Don't have to win it every year, but you do have to win the national championship. And when you can't beat Vanderbilt and you lose with Jaden Daniels as your quarterback, then all of a sudden it becomes apparent you're not going to win a national championship at LSU and you're not meeting the standard. And I think James Franklin, same thing at Penn State, which was, we think he's a national championship coach, so we're going to pay him like he's a national championship coach, and then we're going to get mad when the national championship coach, who hasn't won a national championship, doesn't win the big games to win a national title. Dan Lanning, isn't he kind of in the same spot where at some point we're going to want Dan Lanning to go win the big game and win a national title at Oregon? And so I see these schools that give these coaches contracts like they're national title winners, and they're not, and then their fans get upset when they don't win titles. And then immediately Indiana goes and gives Kirk Cignetti an $11.5 million contract for 8 years. And look, he's a good coach, but he hasn't won a national title, but we're treating him like a national title coach. And eventually, if Indiana can't win the big game, they'll get mad that they're paying him $11.5 million. And that is the ecosystem of college football. And I just don't think that that's sustainable.
I think Indiana might be the outlier, though, because no, Indiana has not won a national championship under Kurt Cignetti. But I mean, like, they've lost 2 games in a season and a half. That's unheard of. Like, I saw a lot of discussion on Twitter, same kind of feeling that you had about, okay, well, what happens next year if Kurt Cignetti goes 8-4? And an Indiana fan replied and goes, he gets a statue. Like, because going 8-4 at Indiana feels like winning the championship, right? Because beating Oregon on the road feels like winning a national championship at Indiana. Does that change at some point? I'm sure it does. The more and more you win, the more and more you're knocking on the door of a championship, the higher your expectations are, and the more rabid your fan base becomes for winning a national championship. But where Indiana is right now, I don't think they had a choice but to pay him all of that money, because Curt Cignetti could have been like, okay, well, I'm just going to go to Penn State then because they're going to pay me that money because I'll just get paid there. Not that I think Curt Cignetti would have done that. I think he'll be at Indiana. Pre-extension, I thought he would have been at Indiana for the rest of his career. But if you're Indiana, you have to lock him up. You don't let that man get out the door when he's brought you unprecedented amounts of success in just 1 year and half of a season. I look at this, though, kind of the premature extensions. Like, I think Tennessee is the perfect example of that. Why do you keep giving Josh Heupel all these extensions?
Yeah.
Like, you give him a 6-year extension, and the next year he gets another 4-year extension. And it's like, what did he do? Go 9-3? And that's no disrespect to Josh Heupel. I think Josh Heupel's a great coach. But you don't have to extend him. You never do anything. You never pay a coach more money or give him more years on his deal unless you have to. But there are so many of these extensions. Like Mike Norvell got the extension whenever Nick Saban retired, and there was so much discussion. Is Alabama going to go after Mike Norvell? Then he got a monster extension, and then Florida State turned around and won 2 games, and now Mike Norvell's on the hot seat, and they want to get rid of him, but they can't get rid of him because it's going to cost them about $60 million. So these premature extensions, I think, come from the new trend of hiring in college football, which is openings in big-time Power 4 schools want to hire existing sitting Power 4 head coaches. We haven't seen very many of these coordinators like the Dan Lannings, like the Kirby Smarts, like the Dabos, the coordinators and the positional coaches get promoted to head coaching positions. That hasn't been the trend. It's been poaching. Lincoln Riley to USC, Brian Kelly to LSU. Like, we haven't seen very many
Kalen DeBoer, Jed Fish.
Kalen DeBoer. Well, yeah. Kalen DeBoer, Jed Fish, like, you're poaching other head coaches. And I talked to somebody very in the know at Florida, and I asked him, like, what are the stipulations? What is the organization looking at? He's like, sitting active Power 4 head coaches. They will not look outside of sitting active Power 4 head coaches. And I can understand that you want to win the press conference. You want to hire the name because the name gets everybody really excited. But I don't know if there is a realistic, active, sitting Power 4 head coach that is, one, going to satisfy the fan base and make everybody all excited and also be the right guy. Because who is that guy? Kirby's not going anywhere. Ryan Day is not going anywhere. I don't think anybody wants Dabo. Dan Lanning's not going anywhere. Kalen DeBoer's not going anywhere. So who are you going to hire? James Franklin?
So I have 3 names for you. And I'm going to preface this with, I think all 3 guys, if they wanted the big job, if they wanted the Florida, if they wanted the Penn State, if they wanted the big job, I think they could get it. But I think all 3 would be stupid to take it. Number 1, Lane Kiffin.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, Jeff Brom. Number 3, Clark Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you why. Because all 3 have good things going where they're coaching right now. And everybody saw Louisville beat Miami on Friday night. But did anybody else see the week before when they lost to Virginia in overtime because their quarterback, Will Levis, away the game? Clark Lee won 2 games in his 3rd year at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt could lose Diego Pavia, win 6 games next year, and I promise you Clark Lee is not going to be on the hot seat. And with Lane Kiffin, he's got a good thing going at Ole Miss. Why take another SEC job and raise the expectations for yourself where they are like Brian Kelly, where it's you have to win the national title or we're going to be unhappy with you? That, to me, all 3 guys could get the big job if they wanted to, and I think all 3 would be stupid to take it. And to your point, I think it is going to be you either have to hire James Franklin or you have to hire a coordinator.
And a coordinator is not going to get everybody excited. A coordinator is not going to get all of the boosters to pump a bunch of money into the NIL, which is probably the most important thing for college programs right now. So I think you're kind of stuck. And I talked about this with Stephen Godfrey, who hosts a podcast on Yahoo Sports, and he talked about Urban Meyer. Like, when Urban Meyer was at Utah, he was hands down, no question, the most sought after coach in any coaching search. Like, when Florida hired Urban Meyer, it was like, you get the home run of the year. Who is that guy? Like, who is that guy right now? Is it Lane Kiffin? And look, I think Lane Kiffin has done a masterful job at Ole Miss, that he has now made Ole Miss nationally relevant. Like, Ole Miss is in the championship conversation. just 5 years ago, like when I was in school, I would say, like, what are you smoking? Like, what are you on? Ole Miss national championship? No, like they're a middle of the road SEC program. But going 10-2 and 9-3 at Ole Miss gets you a statue. Going 9-3 at Florida gets you fired. Like, certain places just have different expectations. Certain places are satisfied with certain things. I don't know right now how much better of a job Florida is than Ole Miss. Because you get money at Ole Miss. There's plenty of investment into Ole Miss. They have the NIL. They had the most expensive transfer portal class of any team in college football last year. Then what you get at Florida that you're not getting at Ole Miss is no longer would Lane Kiffin have to get in his press conferences and beg and plead for students to show up at 11 a.m. kickoffs. That's really all I can kind of decipher between Florida and Ole Miss at this point.
So I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. It's either going to be one of those three coaches is going to take the Florida job or the Penn State job. And it's going to be either, in the case of
Matt
Jeff
Rule.
Matt, okay, fine.
Like, Matt Rule hasn't won in Nebraska. What has Matt Rule
fine.
done? He won 10 games
point.
at Baylor like 7 years ago.
I'm going to tell you who's going to get these jobs. Eli Drinkwitz is going to end up getting one of these big jobs. Like, that's what's going to have to happen.
I wouldn't think that would be a terrible hire. And you know what I would do if I was Eli Drinkwitz? This is what I would do if I was Florida. Lane Kiffin's not going to take the job. I don't think he should take the job. If he does, then congratulations to Florida. You've now won the press conference, and your Twitter mentions will be far more interesting now than they ever have been. I would hire Eli Drinkwitz. And if I was Eli Drinkwitz, I would call up Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator at LSU, and say, things are going well there, isn't it? Coach is on the hot seat. You'll probably get fired by the next coach that comes in. You want to come to Gainesville? Because Blake Baker was the defensive coordinator at Missouri before he was at LSU. And he did a hell of a job at Missouri. He's done a hell of a job at LSU. Like, I think that would be the slam dunk coaching search that I would look for. That's maybe not as sexy as Lane Kiffin, maybe not as sexy as some of these other names, but I think that it would be a smart hire.
Do you think Clark Lee will leave Vanderbilt?
No, I don't. Why would he?
I agree.
Like, he's from Nashville. He played at Vanderbilt. Like, what he's built at Vanderbilt, he will go down in the history books as a god for Vanderbilt football and Vanderbilt athletics until the end of time. Why would you leave that?
I'm in total agreement with you. I would tell all three guys, because again, I think the win on Friday night for Brom was big. I think his name
was huge.
And I will tell you, Louisville is not going to pay Jeff Brom what Penn State would offer him, what Florida would offer him. They are not going to pay him that kind of money. But if it is, hey, I'm from Louisville, I went to Louisville, a la Clark Lee with Nashville and Vanderbilt, and I know I can lose to Virginia and not have everybody lose their minds about it, then I'll be happier here. That's why I think it's going to end up being Brent Key in one of these jobs, or Eli Drinkwitz in one of these jobs, or Joey McGuire in one of these jobs, and not some name that everybody wants. Okay. Tennessee, Bama. Am I wrong for watching that game and thinking that Vanderbilt gave Bama a tougher test than Tennessee did? I wasn't disappointed with Tennessee on Saturday. I just don't think they're in the same class as Bama. And I think what we thought about Tennessee going into the year, which is, hey, they're a team that's going to be solid, but they don't really have a quarterback because they screwed around with Nico, and then Nico left them, and they had to go get Joey Aguilar, and he's making the best of a bad situation. I think Tennessee's fine. I don't think they're very good. Am I wrong for that opinion?
No, I don't think you're wrong for that. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised from what I saw from Joey Aguilar, like playing in a shootout against Georgia, and a game that they really honestly probably should have won. If you just make that kick at the end of the game, like, I thought that was impressive. But I think what we've seen since, close game, the overtime with Mississippi State, close game with Arkansas, getting absolutely blown out at Alabama, I think that's kind of what Tennessee probably is. They're giving 8-4, and I think that's fine. I really do. I said this whenever, Josh Heupel told Nico Yamaliava to go kick rocks. I was like, look, Tennessee fans right now are going to agree with Josh Heupel's decision. And I agree with Josh Heupel's decision. I thought that was the right decision. But don't come crying to me about Josh Heupel when you're 7-5 or 8-4 because you don't have a quarterback. You took a couple of steps back in order to take leaps and bounds forward, or maybe to avoid taking leaps and bounds backwards because you didn't bend the knee to an incredibly average quarterback in Nico Iamaleava who wanted far more than what he was worth. So I will just remind Tennessee fans of that this was going to be just a little bit of a step back because of unforeseen circumstances at the quarterback position. And I think going 8-4 this year is fine. It's fine. Now, if Tennessee loses to Vanderbilt, they will freak the fuck out. Like, freak the fuck out. Because then Diego Pavia's comments that he made on the podcast of like, we run the state of Tennessee. Like, then that's going to be true. And I don't think Tennessee fans can take that along with Tony Vitello leaving. Like, that is like absolute doomsday scenario.
Are we sure Vitello's going to leave?
I think so. I mean,
first of all,
why not? Like, you have a major league opportunity?
I didn't even know Major League Baseball teams paid the kind of money that it would take to get nobody in baseball asks their manager to actually manage anymore. They just ask them to do the press conferences. They've got a phone in the dugout that says, hey, the computer says bring Lopez in now, so go ahead, bring him in there. Yeah, that's how Aaron Boone runs the Yankees.
Aaron Boone, yeah.
I mean, what are we doing here? So, I mean, maybe he takes it. I don't know. Buster Posey's running things there. Quickly on the Titans, what do you make of how bad it is? Oof. And what do you make of the Brian Callahan era? And what do you make about how bad it's gotten?
I mean, what do I make of them now? It's a disaster. What do I make of the Brian Callahan era? An absolute, utter disaster. And how bad it's gotten. I kind of felt like whenever Amy fired John Robinson, I had this spooky, eerie feeling of like, uh-oh, I don't know how this is going to go. And then it was the Rand Carthon collaboration of it all, which was a sheer and utter disaster. And then, then Amy fires Mike Vrabel, and you bring in Brian Callahan. And sure, there's a whole lot of optimism about what a new coach brings. But ever since Amy fired John Robinson, I've just had this feeling of like, what the hell's going on? What is anyone in this building, in the front office, anyone with a pulse within the Titans organization? What is anyone doing? Because it felt kind of clear and obvious to us on the outside, like that's not a good decision. That's a bad move. I don't understand why you're doing that. So I don't understand how it has been so obvious all along to all of us out here, and the people that make millions of dollars to make these decisions, it doesn't seem as obvious to them. So I think it's a sheer and utter disaster. I think the only way that things can get back on the right track is if you bring in a head coach and you let him do what he wants to do. If the head coach says like, hey, I don't believe in Cam Ward. I don't want to work with this quarterback. You don't not hire that coach because he doesn't want to work with that quarterback. You hire a coach that you feel like is going to be a good fit, a coach that's willing to take over a total disaster and a train wreck of a job. And you let that coach run things the way that coach wants to run it. And you have a clear delineation of power. Collaboration was never going to work. The GMs, the coaches. That's how it works, and the owner keeps her nose out of all of that other business.
That sounds good, but you just said if the coach doesn't want the quarterback, then don't you have to acquiesce to the coach? And then the coach would be GMing?
But if the coach doesn't want to coach the quarterback, then you get rid of the quarterback. Like, is everyone pledging their allegiance to Cam Ward so hard that you wouldn't hire a qualified coach that's willing to take this job just because he doesn't want to coach Cam Ward?
Let me answer that.
I don't think that would be the coach calling the shots. I think that you are letting the coach coach.
Let me answer that for you. The answer is yes, they are pledging their allegiance to Cam Ward like that. And I'm not.
Can I ask why?
Because they're stupid. I mean, I was going to ask you, like, the Titans media is kind of splintered a little bit. And I have to give Buck credit because Buck has actually been the one who's been saying this. And I don't know if Buck's like outright said it, but Buck's been hinting at it. I think Cam's a bust. Like, I think this pick is going to fail. And I think it's going to fail because Cam was never as good as they thought he was. Again, they turned down the Giants trade and they picked him because they thought he was Joe Burrow, even though everybody said he doesn't have that kind of profile as a prospect. Cam then goes and plays for a terrible coach right away and a terrible coaching staff. So they've wasted this year. Now those same morons that screwed it up to begin with have to go out and find the next coach, and they have to get that right. And then Cam has to overcome all of his limitations, both mechanically and physically.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think in today's society, with this reactive of an owner and this impulsive of a franchise, that Cam Ward has any shot of having success as a franchise quarterback. And if he's not a franchise quarterback, if he ends up being a tier 2 quarterback, then he's a bust, because you could have just signed a tier 2 quarterback, Daniel Jones, and you could have then traded the pick, and they didn't do it. So I'm ready to say, I think he's a bust. And then the rest of, the Buck is kind of saying, hey, we need to have a talk about Cam Ward, and everyone else like, it's 7 games. It's not fair. But I will point out, Caroline, Cam Ward went from being a day 3 pick to being the first overall pick in 12 games against unranked opponents last year. So if 12 games is enough to get you from, he might be a third string guy we can develop a little bit, or maybe a practice squad guy, to the number 1 pick, then 7 games against NFL competition should be enough to at least tell you, yeah, he ain't going to be Mahomes.
To be fair, took 12 games for Joe Burrow to go from no name to number 1 overall pick.
And guess what? After a year, I knew Joe Burrow was pretty good in the NFL.
Yeah. To the point, I feel like I hear this a lot from Titans fans of, it's just practice. It's just 7 games. It's just this. It's just that. And it's easy to sell yourself on that when you want something to work so badly. When you just say, just hold out a little bit more hope. Let's just hold out a little bit more hope. I'm not willing to go as far as you're going and say that he unequivocally right now is a bust. I think the Titans have one opportunity to get this right. The Titans have one opportunity to hire the right coach. And if you don't hire the right coach, then I have to say that Cam Ward is a bust, because you've just ruined him. You just ruined him with a total turnstile at the head coaching position. He'll now have 2 different offenses and 2 different ears. Yes, he'll be a bust, partly, maybe largely, because of what this organization has done, and they have a track record of doing it, may continue to do to him. So I'm not willing to say that yet. I'll still hold out hope. That maybe there is an alternate universe where the Titans get their heads out of their asses and they make the right hire. And that coach just says, yes, I can work with this. I can work with the sheer and utter talent that we have with Cam Ward and put the right infrastructure around him to succeed. Am I going to bet on that? Of course not. Because what has the Titans infrastructure or the Titans organization done over the last 2 to 3 years to lead me to believe that they can do that? But I will say that there is still a possibility for that to happen. I'm not willing to say he's a bust, but if he is a bust, the Titans are just as much to blame for that as Cam Ward is himself.
Okay, so the final topic today I was going to let you go and then do the final topic, but I figure if you want to be included, this is more of a personal topic for the audience than it is anything else. If you want to be included on this. So this is the question I have for the audience here. This is very, very important to me. It's been weighing on my mind pretty much all day. And that is, in the living room at my home, I have an 85-inch television. And apparently we are going to renovate at our house, and we're going to have built-ins put in upstairs. It's just a big white wall that we have there with a giant television on it. You know it. They don't. But again, it's just a giant white wall with a TV on it, and there's a console underneath it, but the console's going out because Lindsay hates it anyways. So we're going to renovate and put built-ins in there. And so now I didn't know what built-ins were when she said we were going to get built-ins. I was like, okay, whatever. I don't care. But when I found out what they were, I got very, very nervous, because to me, that limits the size of the television that I'm going to be able to have going forward. Right?
Yes.
So I'm looking at getting a 100-inch television. I have an 85-inch television.
That's stupid.
I'm looking at getting a 100-inch television. It would cost about $1,700 or so to get a 100-inch television. It would fit. The guys that are doing the renovation, they came in, measured for both, and they were like, look pretty good with a 100-inch television. The only reason I feel like I might need this 100-inch television is because I have been doing a lot of multi-viewing during the football season. And when they cut those TVs smaller, even on the 85-inch TV, it's still a little too small for my liking. So my question is for the chat, for everybody, for YouTube chat, I want you in here, because if you watch this show, I feel like you truly are a fan of mine. It's not like you're just in the car flipping through the FM dial. So I want to know, should I go for the 100-inch television? Because, again, we're going to have built-ins. So once we have the built-ins, like, that's all she wrote. 100 inches or 85 inches. And, again, keep the multi-view on YouTube TV in mind. What do I do?
I just don't, like, 100 inches is so big. Like, that is superfluous. That is gluttonous. You don't need 100 inches. I agree with Kelsey. 100-inch TV? We just got a 75-inch TV, and it's like giving me a headache because it's so big.
A 75-inch TV?
Yeah.
A 75-inch TV is big, but I just don't think that a 75-inch TV is so big. I mean, it's big, but it's not that big.
It's like as big as I was willing to go without looking gaudy and like a fraternity house. Like at this point, you may as well just sell tickets for IMAX theaters at your house.
So
100 inches is like a movie theater.
So we were watching the Blue Jays Mariners last night, and I do have the 4K package.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I think we're actually going to go Saturday night to game 2, but,
Good.
We were watching the Blue Jays Mariners last night, and I was watching it in 4K. And you could see the sparkles in the Mariners lettering on their uniforms. It was so fucking sick. Like, I was like, once they make everything in 4K, I'm never going to leave my house.
But here's my issue with 4K. It lags so badly. At least Fox in 4K, like the Fox, like college football games, because I'm not watching anything else on Fox. The Fox football games in 4K are so laggy. And it's like, okay, well, I just, like, Buck Rising just ruined it for me on Twitter because he just tweeted out something that will happen on my TV in 5 minutes.
Is it that laggy?
Maybe on my old crappy 50-inch TV it was, but my new 75-incher, it would never.
I'm just saying, I think I'm going with the 100-inch. The multi-view is important. Like last night, we went multi-view when the Seahawks. I think the multi-view is pretty important. Like I was watching Penn State and Oregon back when I thought those teams were good. Penn State and Oregon at the same time as Alabama, Georgia. And it's like, I've got an 85-inch television, and it would be great to just have the two screens next to each other. But instead, it's like I'm not using a third of the TV or maybe 2/3 of the TV because it only takes out that middle part right there to show the game. So I need a bigger TV. And when it's 4 screens at once, like 4 screens on a 100-inch TV, I think would be pretty good.
Have you considered a 2 TV setup?
No, I did that at my old house when I was like a pure bachelor, and the same woman that I threw the party for absolutely hated it. So when I moved, I went with the one big TV.
See, I allow Dylan a 2 TV setup on Saturdays and Sundays. That's it. Once the games are done, the second TV goes in the extra bedroom.
So how do you do that? Like, first of all, how big is the second TV that you use?
I don't know.
Like
probably like 55 or 60 inches.
So what's he like? He carries a fucking 65-inch television into a room and then carries it out?
Yeah.
Fuck that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I like my one TV on the wall, and I like, click. And like I used to have this thing called a switcher, which is like what sports bars have, where you can have like 8 televisions at one time. And they can either show 8 different things or they can show one thing with the 8 pictures. So I had one of those, but it was just a pain in the ass to manage. And there were so many remotes at one time to like keep up with. You had to like label them. And I'm like, F that. I'm like, I just want the multi-view YouTube TV. It's fucking beautiful. Now you can make your own multi-views. And it's great. Like, I just want, hey, Blue Jays baseball, Seahawks football, and I want to be able to watch them both at one time.
The 4 box that YouTube does generate for you, though, are sometimes some doozies. Like there was one the other day. It was like baseball game, football game, The Voice? Like, who in the
They're
world
trying. So I
is
get like a lot of
clicking on this 4-box?
I get a lot of CNN and Fox News where it's like the ALCS and a big college football game and another big college football game and Jesse Waters.
Yeah.
And it's like, the distinguished gentleman says we're going 100 and that's that.
It already sounds like you have your mind made up. Where is the pushback in your life coming from? Is there pushback in your life, or do you just need to feel justified in your decision to drop $1,700 on a TV?
No, there's pushback. I mean, there's pushback from the standpoint that, do we need a 100-inch television?
No.
And I'm like, the multi-view YouTube TV.
No, you don't need to see the sparkle in the uniforms.
It is pretty nice.
You don't need that. You do not need that.
Need and want and if I didn't have to make this decision, if we weren't putting in, if I knew what built-ins were when they suggested built-ins, then this may not be a problem. But I didn't know, so I said, okay, whatever. I don't care. Renovate whatever the fuck you want.
And then when I found out, let me look up what it is first before I say, okay, go crazy, carte blanche.
No. You know what you should get? You should get one of those like rolling TV cart things so that
like that they
someone
had
doesn't
in,
have to carry a
in
TV in
middle school back in the day, whenever they would wheel it in and you'd watch Bill Nye for the day because your teacher was hungover.
Yeah. Katie says Caroline, the voice of logic. So basically, again, not to sound sexist, and Caroline and I had a long talk this weekend about what defines sexism and what doesn't, but
got very philosophical.
It does feel like the women on the YouTube chat and Caroline don't think I need a 100-inch television. And it does feel like the guys in the YouTube chat, again, I don't want to judge. I don't want to throw blankets over anything. It does feel like their belief is that I do need the 100-inch television.
Well, because I feel like every man, most men, let me say, that I know would be totally fine with one fold-up chair, a massive TV, and just something to kick their feet up on. And that would suffice in terms of living room furniture. That's not how this works. Like, like 100 inches, you don't need it. That's gaudy. That's too big. This isn't a fraternity house. This isn't a movie theater. It's not tasteful. What you could do, though, maybe a nice little, compromise. Have you seen those TVs that look like framed pieces of art?
Yes.
They're wildly expensive.
Those are more expensive than a 100-inch television.
They're crazy expensive, but that would be a lovely compromise.
A 100-inch one?
Yeah. Like if Dylan said, I want as big of a TV as could possibly fit on this wall, I would say absolutely positively no, unless it looked pretty.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get the 100-inch TV.
Okay.
Caroline, thank you so much.
You were going to take my logic or voice of reason or justification in the slightest, but I tried. Tell Lindsay I tried.
I think if you gave me a good reason to not have it, then I think that may have played a role. But all I heard was just, you don't need it. And that
you do not need it.
Just because I don't, this is America.
You're going to raise an iPad baby if you have a 100-inch TV. He's going to be glued to the screen. He's going to look at his, he's going to look at his friends' houses and their measly little 85-inch TVs and say, my dad's TV is bigger than that.
By the way, you're on Lindsay's bad list right now.
Why? What did I do?
You lied to her about her birthday present.
No, I didn't.
She said, did you know what Jared got me for my birthday? And you said, no, what did he get you? And then
I didn't know that was for her birthday.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I didn't know it was I just thought it was out of the kindness of your own heart.
Well, I mean, it kind of was, but.
It was. But I didn't realize that was her birthday gift.
Oh, okay. So see, now that makes sense. That's why
I didn't realize it was her gift. I knew you did it, of course.
She was like, who did you tell? And I was like, I told Caroline. And she was like, Caroline said she didn't know. I'm like,
well, because I saw she was at a spa. So I was like, oh, well, maybe Jared got her like a day at the spa for her birthday, which I didn't know that you were going to do that. So I didn't know it was for her birthday, but I did know you did it.
No.
Yeah, you said a ring. Did you get her a ring?
Cost about the same.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, maybe even more than a ring. Should I just tell them what I got anyways? They've lived through this stream long enough. So
yeah.
It's
it was
so we had an Australian Shepherd who passed away, and there was a rescue that led Lindsay to, it's called Australian Shepherd's Fur, F-U-R, ever. And so there was a rescue that Lindsay adopted her Australian Shepherd from. She passed away. the foster families with Australian Shepherds Forever connected us for another one. We picked up Layla, who's our new Australian Shepherd. And Layla was 2 days away from being euthanized at a shelter when somebody at Australian Shepherds Forever picked her up and saved her. So for Lindsay's birthday, I made a $20,000 donation to Australian Shepherds Forever because they were hurting. They were like, hey, we may have to shut down if we don't get some more donations. And I didn't know how much money they needed, but I figured, hey, I would have spent that kind of money to save Stevie when she got sick. So I made a donation, and the woman from the rescue said that pretty much kept the rescue open. And so every dog that they saved between Halloween and Christmas will be because of the donation that we made. And so we had the woman who runs the rescue, who, I think started it and everything else. Very nice woman. Nancy Gonzalez, she had to wait. I gave him the money in September or whatever. She went to, she waited until Lindsay's birthday, and then she called Lindsay and told her that Stevie had made a donation to save the rescue. And so that was what we gave Lindsay. And so that was, so
Stevie
not a lot
saved all those other dogs.
I know. I keep thinking about it like, hey, this is what Stevie would have wanted, like to save other Stevies. And so for me, we went and picked Layla up, and her foster parents, they could not have been nicer. And I knew that they were like, it was tough on them to meet us in Blacksburg, Virginia. We had to drive 6 hours there and back to get Layla. They drove 3 hours to meet us there. And I could tell that it had put a strain on whatever. So we gave them a really nice gift for doing that. But when I got the paperwork with her vet records and I saw, first name, last name, Layla Animal Shelter, it kind of hit me.
Oh,
and then I guess the woman that rescued Layla from the animal shelter in rural Virginia, rural North Carolina, wherever it was, she connected with Lindsay and said that when she rescued Layla from the shelter, that Layla was like 2 days from being put down, and that the woman that worked the shelter was crying because most of the dogs that go in there don't make it out. And so kind of when I heard all of that, I was like, I'm going to make a big donation to Australian Shepherds Forever. I didn't know it would save the rescue, but that was Lindsay's birthday gift. So
it's the best gift I think she ever could have imagined. Knowing how much Stevie meant to her, means to her still.
So when we were in Cincinnati for my buddy's wedding, Lindsay got on my ass about spending money stupidly, and basically kind of gave me like the lecture of like, hey, we shouldn't waste money and And I'm like thinking in my head, I'm like, Lindsay, this is a calculated expenditure, and I am doing that because I've already made the big purchase that I was like, hey, if I make a lot of money, I'm going to make this purchase. I already made that purchase, so now I'm playing around with the other money. Leave me, like, I couldn't tell her, but I wanted to, and I wanted to be a surprise. It ended up being a surprise.
It is a great surprise.
So she came in here after the show on Friday. Her birthday was on Sunday. She came in here after the show on Friday, and I was sitting there, and she walked in, and she like opened the door, and she was like tearing up, and I'm like, what'd I do? Like, what did I do? And then she was like, they called me from the rescue. And I was like, that's what I did. So if anybody wants to make a donation to Australian Shepherds Forever, they could absolutely use it in honor of Stevie and Layla and everything else. Caroline, thank you. Everybody, thank you. Like and subscribe. And be sure to tune in tonight to Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio, where I will be on from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Central Time.
Lord.
Do what you got to do. Sure. So we're excited about that.
Got to pay for that 100-inch TV somehow.
Somehow, some way, and the donation to Australian Shepherds Forever. Somehow, some way, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and we will see everybody tomorrow live here, 2:00.